Thank you all for coming all the way uptown and figuring out how to register for this event. That was very nice of you. My name is Kevin, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever Psychedelic Business Forum presented by North Star and Horizons. So thank you for however many minutes it took you to figure out registration and making it all the way uptown and getting COVID tests and clicking on emails every day and figuring it out. I'm going to have some preliminary announcements here. We're going to get settled and hang out a little bit. Then we're going to, go deeper and deeper as my morning podium time progresses. So we're going to go on a tiny journey this morning. First thing we're going to talk about before our tiny journey is safety, and that we want everyone to feel safe and comfortable here, and including people who are obsessively checking the news, like some people here have this week. The COVID-19 safety policy at this venue is that full vaccination is mandatory for all attendees. Masking is mandatory in common areas and optional in classrooms. If you attend tomorrow, we are going to make masking mandatory inside the auditorium, as we cannot test 600 people for tomorrow's program. If you would just like to reduce your risk of exposure to COVID, we recommend simply just wearing a mask continuously throughout the day. It is that simple to give you a much higher level of protection. And just thank you again for bearing with us this week and dealing with the last minute sort of curveballs. And we're also very grateful to our day sponsor, Curated Mental Health, for providing additional rapid testing service on site, which was arranged on like 24 hours notice. In addition to COVID safety, we're going to get there. Sponsors will get a little more airtime. We want to just talk about professional decorum here. We want everyone to feel very comfortable here. We have a professional code of conduct and safer space policy. It's in our printed program. It's also on the website. If you're made uncomfortable by anyone here, an attendee, staff member, someone at the venue, a speaker, really anyone, you can ask for a supervisor at the registration desk downstairs. You can raise the issue confidentially. We would like to hear about anyone who feels like they're not being treated professionally by anyone in this building. Today's forum, which is produced in collaboration with North Star, is part of our 14th Horizons Perspectives on Psychedelics conference. It's been held annually in New York City since 2007, with exactly one exception, which was 2020. And it is the largest and longest running annual event devoted to psychedelics in the world. And it's pretty good to be back. It's pretty good to be back. So our mission at Horizons is to help the public understand the world of psychedelics. And to this end, we create live and now digital forums, classes, films that examine the role of psychedelic drugs in plant medicine and science, medicine, culture, spirituality, and now, in the 2 years since our last industry. Horizons Perspectives on Psychedelics is produced by Horizons PBC, a public benefit corporation based in New York City, and we operate in partnership with Horizons Media, Inc., a 501c3 not-for-profit educational charity. We're really honored to be hosted here at the New York Academy of Medicine on Central Park, which is also a not-for-profit charity. It's been devoted to advancing health equity since its founding in, this is where they really have us outclassed here, 1847. While, of course, the land we are sitting on top of was originally the island of Madahata and one of the jewels of the Lenni Lenape people, a bunch of stuff happened, and not all of it particularly fair. And quite some time later, in 1925, they began construction of this building, which was completed in 1927. Inscribed above the front entrance is the Latin motto, which my high school Latin teacher, I hope, will forgive me for what's about to happen here. Post mille secula praedescendetur occasia aliquid adjacenti, adjaciendi, meaning he who shall be born 1,000 ages hence will not be barred from his opportunity of adding something further. Very interesting words to contemplate today. We want to thank our conference sponsors, who have helped our organizations grow and offer scholarship opportunities, both to this program and the conference this weekend, as well as the classes that are in process today as well as yesterday. Our title sponsor is Vine Ventures, an early-stage venture capital firm focused on psychedelics and other novel approaches to conscious health and wellness. Has anyone from Vine arrived yet? The Vine guys like to stay out a little late. They'll be here soon enough. Our other sponsor for the day is Curated Mental Health, which is a new mental health collective and practice in Manhattan, led by Dr. Amanda Itzkoff. We're going to hear a little bit more about what they're doing just before lunch. And again, they swept into action this week and sent us a team of people to do COVID rapid testing on a moment's notice as a service, and we're pretty grateful for that. And we're also, of course, grateful to our supporters, MAPS, Nikean Foundation, Trip Therapeutics, the Usona Institute, and our friend sponsors, Be More, Ceruvia, Curated Mental Health, Dr. Bronner's, the Hefter Research Institute, JLS, Journey Clinical, the Psychedelic Science Funders Collaborative, and the River Styx Foundation. You can learn more about the sponsors in our program, and someone from pretty much all of these organizations will be here today and certainly this weekend. So we're going to talk a little bit about our day now, and we are gathered here for the Psychedelic Business Forum. We're going to be in session here till about 1 p.m., at which point we will break for 90 minutes for a catered buffet-style lunch. As you might have noticed, this room is going to be pretty full. People are still trickling in, completing their testing. And there is not, in case you were wondering, also a secret restaurant for 200 people somewhere on this floor. So lunch will be a little bit of a zoo. Be creative about seating opportunities and meeting new friends. Let's keep the few round tables at the back there in good circulation. And if the weather holds, everyone is welcome to join us in Central Park. So I want to also just make a little note about patience and kindness for today and this weekend. If you're working with someone here at registration or with a catering server or any kind of support staff member, really encourage you to think of those fellow humans as your peers and community members for a few days, and maybe not just merely being service workers to whom you're a customer. It's a more humane way to look at the world around you, and in addition, it's great to consider that it's been a uniquely challenging year for people who work in and around the live event and hospitality industry. We've all been operating with half the time and reliability. It's hard to create gatherings like this in general. This year has made it no easier. So please be patient. Please be kind, and it goes a long way for all of us as we still have many days left together here on the team. So now, with some preliminary announcements out of the way, we're going to go a little deeper here. So we're here today about how to talk about putting money in service of psychedelics, healing, community, and betterment, so that those things can grow, which they're doing very rapidly right now, in a sustainable, responsible, and purposeful way. This is actually a pretty different question by what is being asked at most other psychedelic business and investor forums, which are upside down, in my opinion, as the question they present is, how can you put psychedelics in service of money? And the question of how to use psychedelics as a tool for financial goals unto themselves, it's quite simply not where my interest is. That's not what I wake up in the morning as a problem wanting to solve per se. It is a means to an end at best. And it also comes with some real hazards to people who are going to be going through very intense experiences if the ultimate motivation of the people providing that experience to them is driven more by the needs of investors than the people sitting in that room together. I started Horizons in 2007 to be in service of this kind of sharing of knowledge, elevating discourse, building community, and really advocating for the potential of psychedelics. And it's very hard to imagine now, but at the time, people were genuinely concerned that by creating or attending any public event about psychedelics that they would be imprisoned. We got in the early years of Horizons questions galore. What are you doing about undercover law enforcement at your events? How do I know if I buy a ticket to an event on a credit card, it'll be in my FBI file? It has taken a long time to shake off that kind of shadow and stigma of just the poor and incorrect quality of information, the association with criminality, obsessions over things that happened in the 60s and 70s that were only ever part of the story of the history of psychedelics and humankind. And it's really only been in the last few years that public acceptance has arrived. You know, here at Horizons, this began as an art project almost. There was no psychedelic industry, you know, there was no money. If someone came up with a $50,000 philanthropic donation to start some modest study with 10 participants, it was a really big deal in a news event. And we continued doing this work at Horizons out of a sense of service and purpose. You know, moving past that, what we want here at Horizons is to grow. We want to build a strong organization so that, for instance, I don't have to do everything. We want to help more people understand. We want to do more programming. We want to expand. We want to reach more people. We want to keep raising the bar. And in order to do that, we absolutely need money and we absolutely need to be profitable. The philanthropic and donor route comes with a lot of limitations. We need to be able to build something strong, sustainable, profitable that works in the market, but also works with our integrity. We're driven by purpose here, and there are things that are unusual for a media company in the way that we work. We don't allow advertisers to direct the content of our programs. We don't monetize the personal information of our attendees. And we're definitely not interested in compromising the depth and quality of what we discuss here to appeal to a broader audience. So we're in this kind of position where in the last 2 years, in addition to the puzzle of COVID, we've been kind of pondering the sorts of questions we're going to hear about today. How to grow, how to be sustainable, how to be profitable, but in a way that puts our actual purpose and our integrity first and puts money in service of those things. So while many people in this room are certainly grappling with organizations and problems of greater complexity and weight than our kind of media education and community operation, a lot of the questions and hopefully some of the answers are actually the same. I would be remiss to mention that we are presently seeking investors at Horizons PBC. We're doing convertible notes now, and we're building strategic and investor team that will take us to the next level. If anyone would like to fund our future registration and customer support operation, that might be really helpful. And, you know, one of the big elephants in the room today is that the conventional psychedelic investor events don't seem to fully acknowledge that in addition to being in a country with a mental health crisis, we spend very, very lavishly on healthcare in America and get very lackluster results. And that the model we have, the system we have, the institutions we have, the infrastructure we have, and the treatments we have actually worked really well for healthcare investors and owners of pharmaceutical concerns, but they seem to work really poorly for everyone else. And that simply taking a more effective treatment and dropping it into the same model and bucket and structure, it really deserves a lot of scrutiny of that kind of thinking, that we're just going to come up with better treatments and that we're going to plug them into a system that everyone knows is broken, and then we're going to call it a day and pat ourselves on the back. The fundamental problem is that the incentives of the market and structures right now are not really aligned with public good. And I hope that everyone in this room feels some responsibility to improve that and not simply to exploit a broken model that happens to be very beneficial for people who are often venture investors or the owners of pharmaceutical companies. And I'm just going to close by mentioning that it's a very interesting contrast with the indigenous models of stewardship and practice with psychedelics, which there's good archaeological evidence to believe go back about 7,000 years. And those are models that are based on the bonds of family, community, tradition, multi-generational views of responsibility. And those models actually cost almost nothing. But they only work with a strong community, care, trust, no magic solution to scale it. Their goal is not to scale those systems. You can only build trust over time It takes a lot of hard work at a personal level, and it's not really a transaction. But unfortunately, most of us did not have the unique fortune to be born into a family and a community with these kinds of traditions, and we are going to have to invent new models that support the growth and stewardship for the increased demand for psychedelic experiences. We're really in uncharted waters here. And I hope that you'll join me in considering that the priorities of these traditional markets and players and systems and infrastructure, they're often not in alignment with what is best for people having the most delicate and vulnerable and powerful experiences of their lives. And we have a responsibility to improve those systems. So for those of you who had no idea what you were walking into and thought you were going to be attending a how-to guide to start, grow, fund, and sell a pharmaceutical company as rapidly as possible under a conventional model, I would recommend down in the 70s, the Metropolitan Museum of Art has a surrealism show up right now. It's really well regarded. If you walk across the park almost exactly, the Hayden Planetarium at the Museum of Natural History is open. Both of those arguably benefit from psychedelic enhancement. Low doses would not go crazy. But in all seriousness, we know that this is going to be a lot of new information, ideas. Appreciate you listening with an open mind, maybe rethinking some of the things that are in common currency in the world right now. And it is my pleasure to hand over the microphone to my collaborator and co-host, Liana Sananda Galuli, founder and chair, co-founder and chair of North Star and development officer for MAPS Inc.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Said so well. Wow, I am just taking this all in this morning. It is incredible to be together in person in New York City in this establishment of the New York Academy of Medicine. We have been dreaming of this day for about 2 years now when those of us who co-founded North Star first got together really during the Horizons Conference in 2019 in October. You might have noticed when you walk in, there's a little printout zine with a story called, we will call it Paula. I'm not sure if all of you have read this story, but it really sparked this question and this conversation within all of our hearts. We are in an extraordinary moment in time right now. For the first time in most of our lives, we've experienced something at the same exact time as people all over the world. This past nearly 2 years of existing within the experience of COVID has flipped our worlds upside down, and it has also brought to light the extraordinary issues around mental health in our society. Now, my name is Liana Sananda Galuli. I think many people mostly associate me with my work leading development and fundraising at MAPS as Major Gifts Officer. I'm also co-founder and board chair of North Star, and in addition to that, I serve on the board of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. And part of my service there is a commitment to bridging between more traditional and ceremonial uses of plant medicines and psychedelic science. MAPS is currently in its final study, phase 3 trial of MDMA-assisted therapy for the treatment of PTSD. That makes MAPS the leading group on the planet researching psychedelics, and if all goes well, we'll have the first federally regulated access to a psychedelic-assisted therapy protocol. And that was not done by a venture-backed company. It was not done by a publicly traded company that has hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank to fuel and feed it. It was done by, originally, a small and dedicated group of people. We have now grown quite extensively. And it was carried through because it was right and just and good for the world. And it is from that spirit that we're looking at this industry that is now forming. And 2 years ago, when we first got together and started having these conversations and recognized the need for an arena, for a place to hold the conversation on why do we need to approach business and psychedelics and that intersection differently than other industries. What is at stake? We think a lot about set and setting in a psychedelic therapy session. And one thing that we've come to really grapple with is that the millions of people that are going to be experiencing psychedelics for the first time in the coming decade are going to be receiving these experiences through the vehicle of businesses. And we all know how much set and setting can impact the outcomes of a psychedelic therapy experience. And so our question has been, how does the set and setting of business play into that? Recognizing that there are so many powers and influences that can impact how a business shows up in the world and how they conduct themselves and what they decide to do. I mean, we've been going through this process of trying to price MDMA. That is one extraordinarily complex math problem. And there's so much that needs to be accounted for, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we're creating a functional and viable and sustainable business. We also want to make sure that we're producing enough revenue that can support a patient access fund where people who might not be insured or underinsured can still gain access to these treatments, not just the drug, but also the therapy component as well, which is really where the bulk of the expense is in these treatments. We want to make sure that we're also able to fuel and fund drug policy reform, because we at MAPS don't want to limit the ways that people can gain access to these treatments to only a medical context. And so we have this really complex situation now, and now we have a situation where there are hundreds, I've been keeping track of it, it's nearly 400 psychedelic startups that exist in the planet right now. We're looking at a tune of $500 million investment over just the past year or two into the space. We're looking at 30 companies that have gone public and the NASDAQ and Canadian exchanges. And so we understand that we're going to need an extraordinary amount of resources to make all of this happen, and that we're going to need highly functioning and viable businesses to roll out access to the millions of people who can stand to benefit. And what is unique and different is that we also have the opportunity this early on in this moment. This is the second event I've ever attended in person that identifies itself as a psychedelic business forum. And the first one was a month ago in Miami. So we are at the beginning of the beginning right now. And what we do now will reverberate out and impact the shape of this field for years to come. And so our question is, what do we want to lay into the foundation of how we are crafting and creating this field? And for me, psychedelics are very relational. It's about generating a community of care. And if we are all in this room actively participating in building the industry that's going to impact millions of lives, and we know that, right? This isn't some hypothetical thing like it was a few years ago. We're actually at that point now. What we lay into the foundation really matters. And that's been our mission at North Star, is to embed psychedelic wisdom into psychedelic business, to not only impact the way that this field gets formed, but also understanding that we have the opportunity, if we do it really well in our field, to impact how business as a whole gets done. And psychedelics have always had an outsized impact in our society. All of these things that happened in the big cultural renaissance of the 60s that were once these kind of fringe things over to the side, yoga and mindfulness and civil rights and the environmental movement, are now part of the mainstream dominant culture. And so as we work towards mainstreaming psychedelics, we have to ask ourselves, what is the culture that we are mainstreaming alongside of that. And so I encourage us all to stay with that vision today and to ask ourselves these deep questions about how we are doing things, because how we do something matters as much as what we are doing. So that is our mission and our vision. There's so much more I could say. I'm really excited about the content today. The whole journey of starting North Star has taken me on this deep dive into trying to understand this entire movement around what some call the new economy. And so it's taking me through trying to understand the political and the regulatory framework for how these things will be coming online over the next decade. It's taking me to understanding that governance of how a business is operated matters, that ownership matters, that how value is generated and who it goes to in the ecosystem is critical. It's taken me to understanding that how a company gets funded and what those terms are, and how that ends up controlling decision-making of what a company does. All of this is critically important, and so we have to think holistically about every step of the way about how we're doing things. And so that is the content journey today that you will be experiencing, and I just want to take a moment to thank some of my North Star co-founders that are here today. We have Sherelle Noble, we have Kat Konauer, we have Dave Magaki, and we have Tim Chang. And then I also want to recognize the North Star board that's here as well. We have Scarlett Magis, Jeff Mendelson, and Nicole Fox. And that is our small but mighty crew that is here, and we are here to create a container and create a space to hold this conversation that we all know is urgently necessary in this time. And so we've been about 2 years going, and we have a whole lot ahead of us. And so doing this event today has been really an important step in us coming out and standing ourselves up and saying we are here and we are ready. And what it's going to take is participation from our community and our constituents to create a shared vision of what the psychedelic ecosystem can look like in the future. One that is more just, one that is more equitable, one that is accessible to all who can benefit. So thank you so much for joining with us today. I'd like to welcome up Hanifa Nayo Washington. Hanifa is the co-founder of Fireside Project, which is the first national psychedelic peer support hotline. And she's going to begin our day. Our first principle at North Star is to start within. And so we're going to begin today with a little grounding ceremony from Hanifa. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I'm just so accustomed to saying that when I get on a Zoom call. I just felt like I needed to say it this morning. So delightful to be in person today, gathering around this very important subject matter, nurturing these conversations and these relationships. And I really, really respect being asked to come hold space, to set the tone, to drop us in as we begin these conversations and discussions today. I have so much respect for the North Star Pledge and the aspect of bringing the inner work into work, and that we do this collectively, that we see each other as we do this work, not hiding on our own, but we can show our wounds, we can show our growth, we can show up and say this is why psychedelics are important and that we're investing so much time and energy into them, because we understand that we need healing. The world needs this. Everybody should have access. At Fireside Project, presence and listening are essential to what we do. When we are seen and heard, so much is activated within our hearts and minds. And so I wanted today to lead us in a bit of practice, to listen, to drop in, to see each other, and to be heard. And so with that, I'd just like to open us up, and I'm going to invite you to, if it feels good to you, to scooch your bottom to the edge of your seat so that your knees are at a 90-degree angle. You can put your notes down, maybe take a layer off. Bringing your hands, if it feels good and possible to you, to your lap with your palms face up. And as long as you can hear my voice at this time, you can gently flutter your eyes closed. And this might be the first time today that you've dropped into yourself, dropped into this place that is now. And just notice the sounds in the room, the air as it circulates over your face and hands. Noticing the breath as it goes in through the nose and out the mouth. Notice how you feel in this moment. Floating your hands up to your heart center with your left hand at your heart and the right hand on top of that. Allowing the shoulders to remain soft. As you take a deep breath in through the nose and out the mouth. Our hearts are so beautiful. We literally form around our hearts in utero. Our hearts are the first organ, and we form around them. The heart carries so much wisdom, knowledge, power, remembering. Let us listen with our hearts today. Let us remember the gift of this heart and of this life. And let our work be a gift unto this world. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Fluttering the eyes open. Welcome. Thank you.